All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Andrea. I'm a librarian at the Portage District Library, and I'm really excited to be here today with Benje Daneman, the co-founder of the Jazz and Creative Institute. And about a year ago, so November 2019, Benji and I started talking about a cool program we were going to do at the library over the summer. There was going to be jazz, music, musicians. We were going to do it maybe outside with a little picnic. There was going to be a musical instrument petting zoo. And then 2020 happened. But like a true jazz artist, Benji has improvised all along for the last year. And so we have both a wonderful video that I would love to have all of you take a look at. It's on the Portage District Library YouTube, and it's got Benji and Ashley Daneman and Rufus Ferguson teaching us all about jazz, playing some really delightful music. It's just the perfect, relaxing, entertaining, and informative way to spend some time this cold November. So check that out. And today I am going to be talking to Benji a little bit about who he is, who the Jazz and Creative Institute are, and a little bit more about jazz. So thank you for joining us. And Benji, let's start off with who are you? Tell us about how you became interested in jazz, your path to becoming a musician, and your path to creating the Jazz and Creative Institute.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Andrea, and I'm so glad we made this work. I know you're right. It's a year in the making and completely different than what we envisioned, but you hit it on its head as being a jazz musician. We're always open for adventure, and improvising and changing and kind of evolving. So this is cool. We're good for it. And it is fun putting together the music that we did and talking with you today. So about me, I actually grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I actually came to music. I didn't really come from a super musical family. They liked music, and we listened to a lot of folk type music, but um, not tons of jazz. And I got introduced to it through the public schools where I went to school, and fortunately had a really great music program that introduced me to it. And one of the biggest places that, and I just think about this as you were introducing me, one of the places where I first came in contact with a big plethora of jazz music was our public library, the Kent Library System, and they had a great jazz section, and I would start going there weekly just to kind of like devour the jazz CDs, and that was my way of really like getting a lot of music because Spotify didn't exist. This is before the days of Napster and all those other places where you weren't supposed to get music, and even YouTube. So we had to actually, go listen to music and order music, and so I was introduced a lot through the library. So I'm really grateful for that, and I've always remembered that, and seeing how much impact the library does for all different types of people. But for me, it introduced me to jazz music. And I then decided to study music in college, and I studied at Western Michigan University here in Kalamazoo. And I got a degree in music education and another degree at the same time in jazz studies. And then I took some time off between my undergraduate and master's, and I spent some time touring and playing music out in California for a little bit. And I taught music at a community college and a high school. And then I moved out to New York actually to get my master's degree at Manhattan School of Music in New York City. And there I studied jazz trumpet, and I kind of hung out in the city and learned more music kind of through just existing there in the city, which is kind of historically how jazz is about. We'll talk about that more. And I met my future wife at Manhattan School of Music, Ashley, and she was getting her master's in jazz voice. And we decided to, after we both graduated, to move back to Michigan because we both had family here, and we moved back to Kalamazoo. And so over the past 10 years, we've been back and forth from New York and here. We moved here for a few years, and then moved back to New York for a few years, and then moved back here for a few years. And I've done a lot of different things. Being a jazz musician, you tend to adapt. Just like what we're talking about this year, we adapt to our situations. So we ended up having a few kids. We have 3 kids now, and found that teaching was a great way. Well, one thing that I was very passionate about and have always loved doing, but a great way to also kind of provide another source of income for my family. And there's a lot of interest in learning about music and jazz. And so I've taught in all different levels, whether it's through the schools, in the classroom, after school programs as a teaching artist, as a private teacher, or starting up our own projects like the Jazz and Creative Institute right there, and the Kalamazoo Music School, which is right here. And so over the past few years, we actually opened up our own school and started to employ other musicians to teach private music. And it started out as a jazz school, and it's ended up evolving into a general music school. So we have two different wings of that. I'd love to talk more about that eventually. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I also play professionally. I tour around when there's not a pandemic going on. We play for different people. Over the summer, I did have a few gigs, which was nice, social distance with masks. And, I'm very fortunate to play with a lot of great musicians. Kind of the music I really love doing, a lot of it original music. And so teaching, performing, and music administration, which is starting things like schools and other projects, are what I love doing. And so fortunately, that's what I do for my job. It's pretty cool.
It sounds amazing, and I can attest that you do a great job at that. I love that you learned about it in libraries. It warms my librarian heart, and it reminds me that I want to plug the Portage District Library. We have both Frigo and Hoopla in our digital library, and I was searching a little bit before you and I started talking. We have tons and tons of jazz music that people can download through Frigo to keep or listen to on Hoopla. And we do have those old-fashioned CD things as well that you can check. I know from our childhood, Benji. So you can check those out from the library.
You
So,
can put it on your Christmas tree or whatever. If
right?
you got it, then it's pretty good.
Not the libraries, though. Don't put
No,
ours on your Christmas tree.
no, not. All right, I'm gonna stop. You keep going.
So you do a lot of stuff. That's very, very comprehensive teaching and playing and all those different kinds of arrangements. Can you tell us more about the Jazz and Creative Institute and the Kalamazoo Music School and how that came to be and how people could be involved with those?
Totally, yeah. So the Jazz and Creative Institute came to fruition actually in 2014. We've had two different iterations of it. In 2014 and 15, we actually started doing summer programs for high schoolers. We did a summer workshop called Jazz Start, and that was at Western Michigan University. We used their music building, Dalton, to do two summer programs. It was me, my wife Ashley, and a pianist in town named Nick Mueller. And we started this and just ran these week-long programs, and they were really successful. It was, there hasn't been much in regard to music education, sorry, jazz education, or kind of like a jazz community within our Kalamazoo community. There's a lot of great stuff happening at Western Michigan University and in other places, but there's not so much happening within the community. So we were like, let's do this summer program. It was successful. It went really well. And then we actually took a year off because we had moved back to New York City. Nick ended up moving to New York. And then when we moved back, I started working for the Kalamazoo Symphony. And I was the education manager with them. And I started to kind of get this itch. I like artists get these itches. They like, I got to do something. It's been like a year since I've done something. So I started to get this itch, and I was like, you know what? I want to start a big band. I want to start a community big band because there's no youth big band going on. So I did. I wrote a grant for it, and I was like, if I'm going to, from the Arts Council of Greater Kalamazoo, who is amazing at supporting artists in the area. And so I was like, I said, if I'm going to get this grant, I'm going to do this youth big band. I'm just going to do it. And so I did. I got the grant, and they helped to fund the first year of it, the pilot year, and we filled a big band, which is about 18 people, and we had enough actually to fill like another, I think it was a septet, a 7-piece group. So from then we started to actually just create, so this was the rebirth of the Jazz and Creative Institute. And we started to offer ensembles and bands to the public. So mainly for youth. So we actually brought one of our friends, Rufus, who if you've seen the video, on to help direct one of the groups. And it was a successful first year. We did a 7-month process where we rehearsed a band every 2 weeks, and then ended up doing a couple concerts, and it was great. And then we went into a second year, and what had happened is we had started to get asked for lessons. Like, hey, our kid wants to study more jazz. We're like, well, cool, let's hook you up with a musician in town. So we started to do that kind of informally. And then we ended up moving into our location just because me and Ashley were teaching private lessons. And we're like, well, let's start, kind of informally having our teachers use the spot here. So this is where I'm at right now. We're at 310 North Rose Street, downtown. And we started to kind of offer lessons. And then we're like, why don't we move the big band down here for the next year? So slowly and organically, we started to move into our location here. And we expanded out to doing a couple different big bands. We had 2 big bands the next year and a couple small groups. And then we started to offer like formal lessons. So we started to become an actual school, which was really neat. And that grew over the next year. And this was about 2018-ish. And then by 2019, let's just kind of go all in. So we started to kind of push harder. I left working at the Kalamazoo Symphony and took this on full time. And just at the beginning of this year, we expanded to being more of a general music school because we started getting asked to do like, well, do you guys just teach general piano lessons or guitar lessons? And we're like, well, sure, why not? So then we opened up the Kalamazoo Music School. And our big focus for all of this stuff is based around community. And I'll talk about this more about what jazz is about, is that we want when people to come and be a part of our programs or come take a lesson, they feel like they're a part of something because, jazz is truly about community, about people having relationship. And that's kind of where we draw a lot of, our inspiration and what we want to give Kalamazoo. So our kind of tagline is music, community, creativity. Those are the things that we like to offer in both the schools that we're at right now. And so it's exciting. And it continues to grow. Even through a pandemic, we continue to grow, which is crazy. We're doing everything as safely as we can, a lot of virtual stuff, some in-person stuff from a social distance and masked and HEPA filters and partitions. But you know what? Like you said, we adapt. You have to adapt.
Well, it sounds like you're doing it beautifully. So that's awesome. If people are interested in learning more about lessons at the Jazz and Creative Institute or the Kalamazoo Music School, how would they go about pursuing that? Because this is a great time to learn something.
It totally is. Yeah. And we're seeing a lot of people kind of come to us just for that because they have a little bit of extra time, because they want that personal connection, with everything being so like separated these days. It's really important. So we have 2 different websites. They are part of the same program though. So Jazz and Creative, jazzandcreative.com is the Jazz and Creative Institute website. And that talks a little bit more about our jazz programming. So the bands and different stuff. But Jazz and Creative has now become just a wing of the Kalamazoo Music School. So you can also go to the kalamazoomusicschool.com and find out about all those programs. We have lessons for pretty much all the instruments, all ages, all abilities, and we have probably our youngest students. We usually start around 5. We do have one younger, a little bit younger, but is a little special case. But we're always open to talk. But then up through, we have almost an 80-year-old that's playing in one of our bands right now. So it's super awesome. A whole age, we have a lot of intergenerational, a lot of kind of diversity between different, parts of Kalamazoo and people, and it's really exciting to see that.
That's beautiful. I love that you're bringing that to our community. So thank you. So this is about jazz. So I'm going to ask you a really broad question. What is jazz, Benji?
What is jazz? That's the $1 million question. It's actually not as easy as what one might think it would be because um, jazz, even in the jazz world, jazz, the term, is a little bit, there's a little bit of conflict over it because there's a lot of people, and I think there's a really big movement at this moment, actually, I think it's very important that jazz actually is Black American music. It came out of the Black community in our country at a time when there was a lot of oppression against that community. It comes out of we go way back to the work songs during slavery. It started there with improvisation, with calling with emotion, and it moved into after work songs weren't as prevalent, it moved into blues and got fused with church and gospel music, and it started to move into different parts of the country like New Orleans, where different cultures were coming together, and it was a really unique time in our country as things were kind of being birthed. And from New Orleans, it kind of started to take over the whole United States. But I can tell you one thing. So knowing that it comes out of a place of deep passion and deep emotion and a lot of about communications, it comes back to community. It comes back to this music that was birthed out of people coming together, comes out of people celebrating, people mourning, people angry, people tired, people happy, and it was a place where this music was about kind of evoking emotion with each other. And so you can see when in our video when we're talking about it, there's a lot of interaction. There's a lot, and we view it as a conversation. So it's a way that people can interact with one another. So it's based around improvisation. A lot of it is. And improvisation we can talk about in a little bit, but it's just about making things up. It's about talking and reacting and responding. But we now that's my vision of it. It's a very complex music because I haven't even talked about any type of music, right? I've talked about where it came from and what it is. And some people don't even call it jazz. A lot of people will call it Black American music or Black classical music, and that is, I totally agree with both of those terms because that is really its roots. And out of it came so many different styles and genres, including lots of hip hop, rock, lots of the pop music we know today came out of this R&B. So, but we often will think of it like swing music. Swing is like, oh yeah, you hear a swing beat, that's jazz. Sure, yes and no. It is a part of the jazz tree, right? It's a part of what came from there. Before that even came, blues and Dixieland, which has a swing beat. But swing was really the first time in the 1930s when it became pop music, when it kind of exploded. And that's why I think a lot of us really view swing music, like, big band swing or something that, swing dance to. That's why a lot of us view that as being what jazz is. But jazz has always been evolving. Like that's just kind of like the one part that people will often see. There's the part that's like the bossa nova, which fused with Brazilian music, and people will be in an elevator and be like, "Oh, that's elevator music," but that's also another part of the jazz tree, right? But then there's like funk music. I mean, I can go on and on. So it's a difficult thing. So all that to say, it's a difficult thing to really explain, but it's really, really amazing. Once you start digging into a little bit of it, you realize how deep it is. But I can say the one thing where it was birthed from was people's emotions, people responding to their environment, to the country, because there was so much, and honestly, a lot of it very negative. There was so much pain, and they were being, put into this box, and and then then there was the pain of different music being taken from them, and so it's this ongoing thing, but it's people's music, and I'll say that it came directly out of the Black community, and I think that that's something that we all need to remember.
That's really lovely. A lot, a lot to think about, and a lot of maybe myths that you've just busted for us. I can tell you that before really working with you on this, when I thought of jazz, I thought of people with the berets and the black clothes and the snaps. But I love hearing that there's so much more to it and so much that resonates with us right now. That desire for people, connection, community, for a way to react and make something lovely out of some of the difficult things that we're going through now, and having that groundwork laid for us through the early Black American experience. It's you tell the story of jazz very beautifully.
Oh, well, thanks, I appreciate it. It feels a little bit atmospheric sometimes, but saying that, thanks.
So improvisation, you said, is kind of the heart of that. Can you talk a little bit more about improvisation? How does it start? How does it
Yeah.
work?
Well, it's funny because I think a lot of people view improvisation as this kind of like this difficult thing to understand, but it's I mean, especially musicians. When musicians like learn their instruments, blah blah blah, and they're like, I don't improvise, I can't do it. Or even like as people like, I don't even what are improvising? What no, I can't do that. But I always tell my students and who I'm working with that improvisation actually is probably the most common form of anything we're doing. Right now, we're creating, improvisation is creation, right? We create something out of nothing. And before we even knew any words, we were improvising sounds. We were creating sounds because we were figuring it out. And even right now, we're putting these sentences together of words. We're improvising this. I'm not reading. Maybe I'd be more understandable if I was reading, but um, but if I were reading, that's one thing. But even with reading, someone had to create that. They're improvising a thought into something solid. So in music, it's the same concept. You know, you're taking an idea, a concept, and you're gonna make music out of it. So it might be even like an emotion. You know, you can kind of create. I do have my trumpet. Hopefully this will sound okay. But so like if I were to take like something, I could take an emotion and do sad. I'm being a little weird today. Adding my own challenges. Let's see. So something sad. I'm gonna create something that I've never thought of, but it's using what I know to make something. So even just a few notes, and it's how I play it or say it that's going to really evoke an emotion. But then it's also knowing, oh yeah, I know a certain set of notes, so I can use those notes. Or even like three notes, so I can use those three notes and improvise it. You know, so when I tell musicians like improvising isn't that crazy because when you before you even know anything about this instrument, you pick it up and you make a noise. You know, like I could even do that like as a professional and make music out of it, but like someone who's just starting is they're improvising because they're exploring and they're creating. So it's not too far off. We have improvisation around us all the time, whether you're a musician or whether you're just living your life.
I so appreciate that demonstration because I have to tell you, as you were talking about improvisation and the language of jazz, I was thinking, can can we understand that, we being non-jazz musicians? Is it this kind of specialized, rarefied language, and I think that's another kind of myth that a lot of people hold about jazz, but when you just played those notes, I felt sad, and then I felt swingy, and I could understand it, and that was kind of a surprise to me.
It's just it honestly is that simple. It doesn't need to be more complex, and I think that's a few of the myths you're talking about. That there's some major issues that like jazz is complex. I don't understand it. I don't get it. But it's not even about understanding. It's about sometimes depending on what you're listening to, it could just be about feeling it. Like just like like just what are they trying to say? What are they trying to feel? And then there's just a few things where it's like it's not as complex as one thinks. But the problem is, it's over, especially art in general. Art seems to be always be placed in a different corner of the room where it's like, oh, wait, you have to be in the know, or you have to be smart, or you have to be, a musician to get that. But that's rarely the case. Like it's often easier to understand than what I think artists make it out to be.
Well, I think that what maybe some of us non-artists make it out to be as well. And I wanna remind everyone that, Benji has made a fantastic video with Ashley and Rufus from the Jazz and Creative Institute that really, really demonstrates just with that little bit that he did for us with the trumpet, it makes it so accessible and so enjoyable, and when I watched it as a not particularly musically talented person, I could understand what they were saying with their song. I felt happy and sad. I felt a lot of things, and it was really delightful. So I hope that more people will get a chance to check that out before we take it down at the end of November. PDL YouTube, everybody. So Benji, I want to go back to a little bit more to what you were talking about with the community and the connection here in Kalamazoo. For those that are interested, are there kind of local or maybe regional musicians or bands that you would suggest we look into?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. Honestly, supporting any musician locally is really important because um, there's a lot of musicians that there's like a that will just be performing for fun, and then there's also our local professional musicians that are trying to make a living um, as performers, and that's really difficult, and it's even more difficult these days during a pandemic. So the best thing you can do is whatever style of music you want, finding someone in Kalamazoo or in the West Michigan area that's doing it, and the I could give you a list honestly, and any of our faculty. You can go to our website. You can go to the Kalamazoo Music School or the Jazz and Creative Institute website, and check out our faculty. And those are professional musicians. Those are our friends that are out there performing on a regular basis. They all have pretty much all have recordings available. The best thing you can do to support is to buy their recordings directly from them if possible. Don't go to Spotify. You get you know 0.001 cent every time you play it. But if you go to Bandcamp, that's a great site where Bandcamp, where the money primarily is going directly to the musician. Or if you go to you might find Rufus Ferguson, right? You look up Rufus Ferguson and find an album that he's on or something that he's done. You can like them on Facebook, like them on social media, because that all wraps into their career now. But then buying their music, from their website or what have you, that's the best way to support. And like I said, if I were to suggest any musicians in our area, I would say go to our website and check out our faculty, because those are the people that we love and we work with, and that we want to be teaching our community. Like jazz is about mentorship. It's about people learning from one another, which is why we brought together the group of people that we have now, because those are the people that are able to kind of like teach, and teaching comes through experiencing and mentoring and showing. It's not in a classroom all the time. Actually, it didn't never started in the classroom. That came way after, and in a lot of ways drove jazz in a different direction. But it's learned from interaction. So yeah, go out, find your favorite musicians in the area, and just love on them.
I love it. And I don't think there's any better way to end this conversation that we're having. Just go out and find your favorite musicians and love on them, everybody.
That's right. Yes, definitely.
And I am so pleased that I got to spend this time with one of my favorite musicians and favorite people, just a fantastic member of our community here, um, doing great things with kids, with music, with everyone. So, all of you who watch this, please take a look at the websites for the Jazz and Creative Institute and the Kalamazoo Music School. Stop by the Portage Library YouTube and watch the awesome video that Benji and Ashley and Rufus made for us. And if you have any questions about anything, you can go ahead and email the library and we can connect you to Benji at the Jazz and Creative Institute and the Kalamazoo Music School. And as you've seen today, he has a lot of wisdom and a lot of great information to share about jazz, and he's really good at it. So don't miss that opportunity. Right, Benji, thank you so much for doing this, for improvising over the past year with us and making this just a really nice conversation and that great video. Super grateful for you.
My pleasure, and I want to say thank you. You've always been a huge support to me and to musicians in the area, and the Portage District Library is amazing. So if you're watching this and you want to support them, just keep telling people about it. Keep using their services. Donate. Right? Well, I don't know. I can't say anything for guys, but like just support the libraries because they do change communities, and
Well,
I'm
just
great.
like musicians, just find us and love on us, right?
Hey, just love on the library. all that stuff. So
And
thank you.
maybe next summer we'll get to have that jazz picnic and petting zoo.
That'd be
Fingers
fun.
crossed.
That'd be fun.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks.